All right, there we go. Good morning, Chair Postman, members Garrett and Vollendroff. The lobby is open. Recording has begun.
Thank you, Dustin. Good morning, everybody. We'll convene the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board Caucus meeting for Tuesday, May 24th, 2022. Our first item on the agenda today is review of industry allowances related to COVID. As anybody who's been watching us for the last couple of years knows, there's been a series of these allowances, both on the alcohol and cannabis side, to respond to various parts of the pressures that the pandemic brought on businesses, for businesses, consumers, and others. And a set of those are scheduled to expire, and we've talked about them before, but we've got a group of them coming up for expiration soon. And so I asked Justin to come and talk about a few of them. In particular, we've been talking about them internally here. So Justin Nordhorn, our Policy and External Affairs Director, is with us, and I'll just toss it to you, Justin, for a kind of an overview of where we're at.
All right, well, thank you all. Good morning, Chair Postman, members Garrett and Vollendroff. Thanks for having me here today. I will just kind of run through these briefly. I know we've had a number of discussions. All of these are on our website. There are links that folks who've been tracking this can access. And so we're talking about, there are currently 8 that are still kind of remaining. We had 2 that were up there that were food service requirements and outdoor alcohol service. Those were taken care of for this period of time by House Bill 1480. And so those 2 are not in consideration for expiration because of the legislation that was passed. So we have 4 cannabis ones and we have 4 alcohol. So I'll start with the alcohol components. We have the silent auction. And let me back up. All of these are set to expire June 1st of this year. And so, the consideration that's being discussed is, extending some of these based on need. And there's a number of them that, as the agency policy work group has worked through, has taken a look at some of these and had a lot of discussion around those. So I'll start with the online silent auctions. It's pretty straightforward. During COVID, there was not access to locations, size of events, etc. So nonprofit organizations frequently try to do auctions to support their nonprofit activities. And we had online silent auctions as a way to accommodate those. And so there's an interest in moving those forward for a little bit more time. We also have renting kitchens to non-licensees. And so basically when the licensees could not be fully open, they had some kitchen space. Other people were doing a number of different things where they didn't have a kitchen, but they didn't want to be in alcohol sales or service. And so this afforded them an opportunity to rent out that kitchen, compensate or be compensated for some of the costs that they're having to keep their business open. And this one is an interesting one because we had nobody really exercise to us and ask for the accommodation for this particular allowance. However, there's a number of folks that are actually utilizing this to our understanding and talking to the Hospitality Association as well as in other areas. And so what it sounds like has happened is a number of licensees have gone to their local jurisdiction, the local health department, to talk to them about the food service issues, and they get approval from them and they think that's all they needed to do. Again, these folks aren't typically liquor licensees that are going in there to rent out the kitchen. So of course the licensee should be, contacting us that this is occurring. So I think there's just some education that needs to be conducted, and this is certainly something of interest that's not in conflict with statute. So the other 2 for the alcohol industry are minor employees being in restricted areas and also mandatory alcohol server class 13 permits and what those acts of employment would do. Those 2 are kind of linked together. And essentially during the pandemic, in order to separate serving staff from exposure to COVID for in-house dining, we said, okay, your class 13 permit, which is those who are underage, those 18, 19, and 20-year-olds could go and be in the restricted area, pour the drinks there, and then take them out to the table. This does not allow them to be a bartender, so they can't mix spirits cocktails, but they could open the bottle of wine behind the scenes versus at the table and then pour it. So we felt that that was a reasonable type of issue. And as this has transpired, what the industry has been experienced as of late is a significant challenge in hiring staff. And so one of the challenges in this particular area has morphed from the health and safety aspects to some of the feasibility of operations, because they can't hire staff over 21 as easily as they can the 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. And so the request has been to allow for this to continue based on the employment shortage issues that these folks face. So all four of those, there's a recommendation to have those be extended till September 30th. Go through the summer, and then we could revisit some of those throughout the course. Of course, at any point in time, somebody could file a formal rules petition to see if they, if you all would be interested in looking at this on a permanent basis. The four cannabis ones, and these ones, there are two that I'll start with. There's a giving away hand sanitizer and face masks. That one is set to, again, to expire on June 1st. We are suggesting just allowing that to expire. We put out a policy statement last year on incidental giveaways. And so this would actually fall under that particular provision if these things do not cost more than $1 that they're handing out. And so we felt like this isn't really necessary anymore, because there's other opportunities to provide those safety services. The walk-up windows and curbside service is one of those that we find higher risk and more challenging, because it is in direct conflict with the provisions of RCW. So it calls out, you can't have these. We did accommodate that for the health and safety reasons during the pandemic, so people didn't have to go into the store. We did not allow people to construct windows if they didn't have one already, and so we were very limited in what they could do. And we did not allow for drive-through service, so it was only a walk-up window where that transaction could happen, or the curbside. Those require a statutory change to make those permanent. So we're suggesting just having those lapse at this point in time, because the emergency of having the stores restricted in that type of way for customers to come in isn't necessarily there. There's still an interest, I would say, from licensees out there. And I would also say there's probably an interest from different groups, such as patients that like that separation. However, the group felt like this should, because of the risks associated with the RCW, we should just let this one lapse. And then the last one is more of a debate that's going on with this particular one, and this is minors in the producer licensed premises, producer processors. So initially what we had done, because of the shutdown, schools were closed, or not closed, but it was all online learning. And so students weren't able to get into the classroom. Daycares were closing. And so we provided this accommodation for those youth who were children or grandchildren of the licensee of the business, not the managers, not the employees, just the licensee. And they could have the 16 and under, those youth that may need more supervision, to be able to come onto the age-restricted area. And the thought was they would be in the office doing their online learning or whatnot in that particular environment. They weren't allowed to go and handle product or anything like that. Even if they were family members, they couldn't, they are family members, obviously, but they couldn't go out and work on the farm just like other agricultural areas because of the restricted nature of the product. So this particular one is set to expire on June 1st. There's a lot of concerns from a number of folks, including public health, around having minors in these types of environments. We did get a request, and I believe you all three saw the request that came into the board to ask for this extension because there's a feeling that the daycares are not all open. There are wait lists for folks to get in there. They would have to hire employees in order to be able to have one of the family members watch the children off-site. And so there's that employment element that's in there. There's a lot of concerns about the the health and safety of the youth on these types of premises, especially given some of the nature of the business with pesticides and those types of things and types of exposure. Of course, we don't regulate them, but we do see that in other agricultural areas as well. But the indoor grows, I think there's a higher risk of exposure. But there certainly is, challenges, especially in rural areas, to get people to come out to watch children if you're not having a ability to access daycare. That's certainly another consideration, especially for small farms that are just family run. So this one is something that I know in our conversations and with conversations independently with some of you that there's some concerns about having this lapse immediately and that more discussion may be needed. And so this was asked to be brought forward into this type of forum so the three of you could actually have a conversation around this and kind of decide which direction would be appropriate on this particular one. This is a rule, I will say, and it does not conflict with statute, but this is something that is definitely concerning to a number of folks. So I'll offer that as well.
Thanks, Justin. Questions for Justin?
Oh,
Jim,
you're
you're
muted.
muted, I think.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Justin, I have a question. Do we have a sense of the scope of the challenge regarding children on processor producer sites? How big a problem is this in terms of how many people we actually know it impacts?
Yeah, we don't have any good data to suggest how many this would impact. We have heard anecdotally over the last year, and I believe we've even heard it in the public forums, that licensees have commented this has been one of the biggest helps that LCB has done for them through this period, and so that suggested to me that there was a lot of interest in utilizing that. We haven't had a lot of requests for extensions. And so, I don't know what the impact really is across the state, if this is fairly limited or if it is more widespread. So I really don't have any data to help with that particular aspect.
Thank you.
Justin, if I owned a distillery, could I bring my kid there today?
If it's age restricted, no. And typically the distilleries are set up a little different, but I'll use like some of the wineries and brew pub type of thing. If it's not an age restricted environment, then the kids are not barred from being in that type of area. We do have concerns about advertising and those types of things where they're children in, advertising, let's say for alcohol or wineries. I mean, if you want to do a family photo outside of the, main vineyard with, for Christmas or whatever the case may be, that would not necessarily be alarming. But if you have it in a tasting room where people are drinking, the kids are there, then we would have a lot of concerns about how that goes. So there's other nuances, and I haven't seen any of those types of issues in the cannabis industry, but more in the alcohol side of things.
And so when you talk about conflicting with the statute or not, so as I understand this, then, on the alcohol side, the legislature voted to extend similar to this one we're talking about for the alcohol thing on delivery and takeout, right? They put that in statute.
Yes.
Till 2023.
Correct.
Okay.
And they'll be reviewing it again. Yes.
Okay. And that's right. And we're going to there's a study going on about what the impact on that has been, both to the industry and public health and everything else, public safety. So, but there wasn't anything of that sort on the cannabis side. There was no legislation that extended anything on the cannabis side.
That's correct. We didn't see any legislative movement for any of the allowances that were created.
And on the cannabis, sticking with cannabis then, so the windows and the drive up, that conflicts with statute, which says you can't do that. The reason the LCB allowed it was just under that sense of an emergency, really, that we were in this pandemic and we were trying to protect both employees and the customers. But I would think it does get harder to have policy at the LCB that conflicts so clearly with state law. So those I kind of get. But on the one that we were talking about with the minors in daycare, there is no statutory prohibition to that. So that means that the prohibition that exists is in our rules around producer processors?
Correct. Yeah, there's a statutory prohibition for retailers, but not for the non-retail side. And the allowance, I will also offer the parameters around the allowance did not, of course, it didn't include retailers, nor did it include transportation. So you couldn't bring your child on your routes of transportation either.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry, I forgot what my last one was there. Ollie, you got a question?
Yeah, two things. The first one was, oh God, I'm forgetting. Oh, since we allowed this and because it's been allowed for what, 2 years or 1 year? And during that time, have we had any issues?
So this was allowed, I think, fairly early on, and of course, I'm losing track of time through this whole thing. So it could be 18 months to almost 2 years. I don't think it's been quite 2 years yet. And have we had any issues? I would say that I'm not aware of any complaints. However, the focus has been, I know that in a number of enforcement reports over the last couple of years has been around masking requirements and those types of things, more in the open to the public type of environment. So I don't think that our staffing levels at this point in time could suggest that there's absolutely no issues with it, because I don't think that they had an opportunity really to do oversight there. But have we had any actions that I'm aware of? No. Or has there been any complaints necessarily around this particular issue? No. But that doesn't mean that nothing has happened.
But the answer is no.
Correct.
Okay. And with that and the allowance, and it's already been 18 months, give or take, even with the concerns that anyone is bringing up now against it, we're only talking about an additional of something that's been going on for 18 months to extend it an additional 60 days, maybe.
Yeah, the way that the policy work group was looking at the extensions is we felt it would be appropriate to use the same date, not only internally for operational staff, understanding when allowances expire, but also industry members. And so we are suggesting correlating dates of all of the allowance expiration to be September 30th, which is also the date of producer processors transitioning product from the quality control rules that we just did to retail, and that's kind of the cutoff. So using one date is easier for everybody to remember, and that's why we suggested that particular date.
Okay. And I would think by then kids will be back in school and things like that, since it's in September. And I think just what I hear here local when it comes to daycare and stuff, a lot of daycares have shut down. The ones that are open, like you said, it's more expensive and very limited space. So I can see this being a carryover of COVID related things happening still.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And, my guess is it's more in need on the eastern part of the state, where there's just fewer daycare facilities, and you might be more remote if you have an outdoor farm as opposed to indoor growers on the west side. It just may not be taken advantage of over, here as much. But I certainly see the argument for allowing that to continue a little bit. And then, as you mentioned earlier, Justin, on any of these that are expiring, people could petition for submit a rules petition for us to consider making any of these permanent. I think one of the letters we got, sort of suggested that, but hadn't. So we need to reach back out and let people know specifically how to do that. And given today's the 24th. We have, 7 days till these expire. What is the timeline? When do we really need to know for sure? And when would we alert licensees for the whole package of what's happening?
Yeah, we were actually hoping to alert folks today or tomorrow to give the time for that. With the expirations, it has been very transparent. I would offer that people
Sure.
know that these were expiring. Of course, we got the letter requesting an extension, so there was an understanding these are expiring. And so I think that folks, it's not a last minute notification that, hey, everybody, this is expiring. But it would be helpful to get that messaging out sooner than later, especially so we can have it publicly facing on the website. If people, aren't involved in these conversations and they're looking to say, did anything happen? I don't know what's going on, then we can have that published for their use on that particular area. So we were really hoping to have this out. We potentially wanted to do a little bit earlier, but this one was a tricky one. So I think that that more robust conversation with the three of you is important.
It is trickier. I would just say I would support an extension of the minor and the facilities one, and on the cannabis side, only that one, because it does not conflict with statute. I don't think we have a really good foundation to continue any other that conflicts with statute, given the state of the pandemic. But given the state of the pandemic, it's not over. And it's, doing this and just really, I would tell you, in the last couple of weeks, the number of people who I know who have either contracted COVID or know somebody or in their family, it's coming again, And so I understand the anxiety around some of these parents, particularly in the more remote areas. So, and this is not a board vote that we take on these. It is an administrative function, and they were set to expire. So I don't think we do it, but I would just tell you, my opinion is we should allow hopefully last extension of this till the start of the school year. And I say hopefully only because I don't know what'll happen with the pandemic. If we are where we are today, then it'll be time for people to find a permanent, support for childcare. And if we want to have the debate about should we change our rules to allow this on a permanent basis, I would welcome that discussion as well. And so would encourage any licensee who wants that to let us know, and let's have that conversation. And then I also just think there's a question about keeping alcohol and cannabis somewhat in the same lens for us. Like, if we're allowing certain things on alcohol, why wouldn't we? And, none of these are exactly the same. I get that. The alcohol industry is very different. We got, on-premise consumption and all that. So it's different, but I just want us to, I want to keep an open mind for myself. Like, okay, if this were the alcohol industry and it did, what would we do? So that's my opinion, is I would go ahead and give that one one last extension. And again, it's not a vote, but go ahead. Sorry.
And I was going to say, and I agree with you, David, even though it's not a vote.
Well, in that same spirit, I would say that, it doesn't come without some careful consideration, but given, if nothing else, and David, you just said this, but I just feel like it bears repeating, and that is that if nothing else, we've learned that there is uncertainty with this virus. And given where we're at right now and that uncertainty, it feels appropriate to give some certainty to this particular request. And so I would support this, and then also support that if it continues, that it be through the rulemaking process.
I think that's important to say, Jim, too, which is, as you said, Justin, each time we're very open about them expiring. And I get that people don't like it when it gets close to the expiration. I don't either, but I certainly would commit to that too, that if there's any discussion of extending, it really should go through the rules process at this point. We shouldn't just, this same thing we're doing away with board interim policies and things. We're trying to, do these things in a really organized way. And so I would say too, this would be the last extension of this sort that I would support on this one, and that it should really be considered by rules if we want to continue. So, Justin, there's the consensus. Oh, yeah, please go ahead.
But in making the statement that you just made, how long does the rule process take?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah. So depending on when a petition comes in, and as David had mentioned, that we would reach out to the requester because there is a statement at the end that they had an interest. That's not a formal rule request, but my staff can certainly reach out and provide some guidance on if they are interested in pursuing a rule request, then there's a process that they can enter into. The rules could take up to 6 months. But if we were going into the rule process, and let's say we were at the post public comment period, knowing what was where people were, and then you had some positions on that, it could really forecast whether or not those rules are likely to move or not, and therefore you can either talk about that last date or not.
Right. I was just trying to say we don't want to say the last time, not knowing what's going to be going on and not knowing the status of the rule. So I'm just trying to keep you from putting the right and left foot in your mouth.
Well, yes. And so I think I just made conflicting statements. On the one hand, I said I'll be interested to see what happens to the virus come September 30th. So yes, I will keep an open mind to that and keep both feet out of my mouth for now, and just, but I do think it's important to be as clear as we can.
I do too.
That none of these allowances were meant to be permanent, and some conflict with statute, and I don't think we can justify that, and I just really want people to hear that these are allowances. They're temporary allowances based on circumstances of the moment.
Yeah.
So when we get close to the next expiration, we'll look at what that moment looks like and see. That's what I will put in my head. It's like what's happening with case counts, what's happening with schools and things of that sort. What's happening with the labor market. Maybe we don't need all the same things on the alcohol side either. So we need to be open and dynamic thinking like that. So Ollie, thank you for calling me on that. I shouldn't say it's absolutely the last time I'll extend it, but I do think if people think this should be permanent would have to be through rules. I don't want to continue this over and over and over again and make it essentially a permanent thing based on temporary extensions.
I would also offer to that perspective. I think there's a sense of, at least from staff, that if the governor were to lift the state of emergency, which has not been lifted yet, if that were to be lifted, then the allowances should dissipate at that particular point, because there's really no more justification to continue on with the allowance without permanent rulemaking.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah. And conversely, if he were to reimpose certain mandates in workplaces or travel or whatever, as we did when things were bad, we would take that into consideration as well.
Right.
All right.
So I will circle back with our policy team, and then Brian and I will work working with communications, and we'll hopefully get some messaging out this week, hopefully sooner than later. But not knowing what's on everybody's plate, I don't want to commit them to something that I can't deliver on. So.
Right. And will you communicate with our letter writer as well to make clear what that process would be if they're looking for a formal request?
Absolutely. We'll definitely reach out.
Okay, great. Thank you for taking us through this. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Justin.
All right. Our next item is a general rules update. And we have I'm not sure, I'm going to turn it to our senior rules coordinator, Audrey Vasek, and see if she wants to go first. Ms. Vasek? I say senior just, because you were here before your two colleagues, that's all.
Well, thank you, Chair Postman, board members. So I'll just briefly go over the alcohol and the general rulemaking projects we have currently ongoing. So I'll start with the axe throwing at liquor license premises. We're currently looking at bringing that CR 103 package for the board to consider at the next board meeting, which would be June 8th. The public comment period ended back on April 27th. We have been receiving a couple follow-up questions, even though the comment period closed, just asking about the project status and things like that. But no further updates on that. And then the project to implement Senate Bill 5940, the contract packaging services endorsement. We're meeting internally with licensing staff, finance, enforcement education to develop some conceptual draft rules for that. And after we develop those rules, we'll look at distributing those publicly through GovDelivery for feedback. So we are hopefully looking at having them done later in June or early July. For the electronic transmission of documents for service and filing, which is general rulemaking, so it's applicable to not only the alcohol licensees, but also cannabis and vapor and tobacco. The public comment period opened on May 11th after the board approved the CR 102, and we haven't received any comments yet. But the comment period will remain open till end of day on June 22nd, which is when the public hearing is also scheduled. So those are all my updates. And are there any questions you have about any of those projects?
I don't have any questions, but David, you missed Jim's big announcement about axe throwing.
What's that?
Oh, I just shared last meeting that I actually went to the axe throwing venue here in Seattle to experience it myself. I'm one of those individuals when making and contemplating a decision, I like to see things and talk to people. And so I actually made a visit. I have a follow-up meeting with Audrey and Robert tomorrow to get a little bit more information. So just gathering data and information and thinking about impacts from a lot of different angles before our next meeting.
Great. What was the experience like?
It was a good experience. I thought
Yeah.
that the particular organization had things well organized, and the safety protocols were clearly in place. Staff were committed to the process that they had put in place to assure safety. It happened to be Mother's Day, and so there were families there with children throwing axes, and it was an overall good experience from that perspective. I had a good time and threw a few axes myself and got a little better in the meantime. And it was an overall interesting and positive experience.
That's great. I can't quite imagine what my mother would have said if I one day said, we're going to go axe throwing for Mother's Day, Mom. Well, that's good. Yes. Ollie's been trying to get me to go throw axes. I just haven't made it to Seattle, but I still have some time, so maybe I'll try. I'm afraid I'll hurt myself. Okay, no questions, Audrey. Thank you. And then do we have other updates? Jeff Kildall on the cannabis side. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Chair Postman and members Garrett and Vollendroff. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. And I would just like to provide quick updates on two rulemaking projects. At the board meeting on June 8th, I plan to present the CR 103 package for the board's consideration for the permanent rules regarding pesticide action levels. These rules update technical information for several pesticides that are allowed for use with cannabis. And this update also is being done to ensure consistency with the cannabis quality control testing rules that we recently completed. And that change will include removing some language about remediation of cannabis products that is no longer consistent with the quality control testing rules. And this rulemaking would also remove redundant language and would replace the term quality control testing or quality assurance testing, excuse me, with quality control testing. So that will be ready for consideration at the next board meeting. And then at the board meeting on July 6th, I plan to present the CR 103 package for permanent rulemaking regarding second substitute House Bill 1210, to replace the term marijuana with the term cannabis throughout all of the LCB's rules, which are in Chapter 314.55 WAC. For the 1210 changes, the 45-day public comment period extends until Saturday, July 2nd, 2022. And under this timeline, these rules would become effective 31 days after July 6th, which would be August 6th, 2022. And this concludes my update for today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Kilwell.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Or Jeff, sorry.
Thank you.
And Robert Despain, anything to add to our update today?
I'm getting there. Sorry, I need to.
That's right.
With my camera right now. Just a minute. There we go. Okay, I'm
Good
here.
morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair Postman. Good morning, Board Member Garrett, Board Member Vollendorf. Hi, how are you? So last but not least, in order of seniority, I guess.
That's right.
So I won't add to the current projects that Audrey and Jeff have already mentioned. I will say there's one additional project that we just started, I think 2 weeks ago. You all approved the CR 101 for the related to expanding and clarifying evaluation of additives, solvents, ingredients, or compounds used in the production and processing of cannabis products. And so as part of that, I just wanted to make a plug for the 4th deliberative dialogue session on cannabis plant chemistry is going to be next Tuesday, May 31st. There's not a lot of movement yet since filing the CR 101. We have our first rule drafting session this week. And the second rule drafting session internally is going to be just after the May 31st deliberative dialogue session. We're really hoping that we get a lot of good discussion in these deliberative dialogues, and that will help kind of inform the direction we go with the conceptual draft rules. And then we have an additional deliberative dialogue session in June, and then a third rule drafting session after that. And then tentatively a listen and learn session, which is when we would have kind of a more structured conceptual draft rule set, would be planned for currently, tentatively, the second week of July. And so then we'd have a lot more specific feedback from stakeholders. We have some other potential rule projects on the horizon, but I think Dr. Hoffman's already addressed those with all of you, and those aren't, I don't think those are ready for presentation yet, but we are, actively trying to progress and move forward with these.
Great, good. Thank you, Robert.
Any questions?
See none.
Okay, good. Thank you so much.
Yep, have a good day. And now we'll turn to our director, Rick Garza, for any general agency updates. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Postman and board members Garrett and Vollendorf. Good to see you today. A couple of topics I wanted to cover today. I wasn't with you a couple of weeks ago tomorrow at EMT. I was out of town, and so it may feel a bit redundant, but I just wanted to cover a couple of topics. First, as you know, we've been trying to do what we can to assist our cannabis retailers with the rash of armed robberies that occurred in the last few months. And just so you're aware, as you know, we partnered with the Washington State Crime Prevention Association to create training, virtual trainings. 10 to 12 are planned. The first was held on May 12th in Seattle, and it went quite well. And we'll get you some specifics from Chandra where we have it. But according to Chandra, there were a number of licensees present, and so we'll continue to do that. As you also know, we used our emergency contract process to establish a contract with a security firm to provide assessments and to literally go to our retail shops, work with them, see what they can do with respect to recommendations to make a more secure place for them. And today we'll be sending an email out to all of our retailers where they can sign up for that. And that can begin in the next few weeks, just so you're all aware. And as you well know, we're paying for that to provide that to our retailers. And so just wanted to get you up to speed with the work that's happening there, and frankly would take any questions that you might have. Also, and for Jim, if Jim's not been involved in this process before, but I think you may have, we go through every 2 years, because we're a biennial budget and legislative front here. We have a agency request process where agencies of the state can bring forward proposals, and we typically start that around June, but we're starting it a little early in May. There's a timeline that Chris Thompson, and I'll make sure that you have that if it's not been given to you, a timeline that we use. It starts in June typically and takes us to when the proposals are due to the governor's office, which is typically late September, early October. But I'll provide that to you. And within that timeline, it's all the different things that have to happen in order for us to get that. I'll start with, first we go to the divisions, which we've done, and said, do you have any proposals or ideas that you have that you'd like to bring forward? Typically, you're going to see that in licensing and enforcement for the most part. We had a couple of bills last year that you're both aware of that went forward, but we began that process. And in the next couple of weeks, I think on June 10th, the team will meet to kind of go through those proposals. It gives us a month. Typically what we'll do is we'll make some, we won't make decisions to bring forward until we've had an opportunity to speak with all of you, but we will begin to vet those and then ask for more information. There's a template that we'll also provide that's pretty simple to bring a proposal forward. You know, it's really obvious questions. I don't have it in front of me, but what's requiring it to be done by statute? Can we not do it by rule? What's the fiscal impact of the proposal on the agency? In other words, are there other ways of accomplishing this without taking legislation forward? And we've been using that process for many years, but I just wanted you to be aware. I'll send you a copy of what that looks like. Thinking about that process, one of the things that I want to change a little bit that we've not done in quite some time, I'd like to have Justin, myself, and Chris meet with you individually to hear any ideas you might have about legislation, ideas, proposals. Jim, I'll just use one of them that you shared with me the last time we met. You said, Rick, it's my understanding that we used to have a research position within the agency. And I said, we did. Tricia Ehrlich, who now over at WSDA, was someone that we hired when we were putting the system together for cannabis. One of the things that we realize is, my God, we don't have anybody that can at least get to a clearinghouse of information or research or science around cannabis that would help us when we're making decisions with respect to policy, rules, or legislation. So we brought Tricia in for that period of time. Well, Tricia then got picked up by WSDA in agriculture, where she is now. And we were kind of going through this rough period with the pandemic that you might all recall, where we were looking at making significant staff reductions that the governor was bringing forward because of lack of revenue. Of course, everything turned the other way. But we made a decision at that point to not fill the position. And frankly, have been using the resources of CANRA, the Cannabis Regulators Association, to help inform us and educate us around issues around cannabis. But I recall your question, Jim, and I think it's a good one to look back and meet with the staff to talk about, is this something that we want to put our resources toward? Is someone that can assist us with more research? And it's not just in the cannabis space, but I'll be honest with you, that's where it felt like it was more lacking. We've been regulating the alcohol industry for some time. And as you know, and Jim, you did some of the work yourself, there's a lot of science and research around alcohol where it's absent in the cannabis space, especially in our country because of the prohibition federally. So anyway, I will get Chris and Justin and I to get some time with each of you individually to kind of hear your thoughts about what, if there's some thoughts that you have, not only budget related, but policy related, that are bigger than some of the divisions are looking at Typically, they're looking at the areas, the fear of the operations that they have, whether it's licensing or enforcement. So I honestly have not talked to Justin or Chris about this, but I thought about it in the last few days and thought, rather than just giving you the opportunity to know what proposals come forward from other division directors, it would be good to engage with you all to hear if you think there are some things that we need to consider. And I think about it all as it relates to social equity, and some of the work that we suggested last year, and whether we want to, as an agency, move forward with something. And then Jim, knowing your background, are there other areas that we need to consider that we haven't? And then David, as our chairman, is so ingrained and helpful with us in all the work that we're doing with the policy work group. And I know you had the opportunity to join us recently, Jim, to see that work that we do week to week. And so that was something that I wanted to share with you all. Also, I don't want to forget that as I talked about the armed robberies and the issues there, it's really predicated by the fact that I can't use a credit or debit card when I go into a retail shop. So there's been a lot of work that David's been a part of staff meeting with Senator Murray's office, which I think I've shared with you, Senator Cantwell's office, and yesterday with Congresswoman Del Bene's office. They all three happen to be conferees on what's called the Competes Act, which has a provision in it to allow for safe banking. And so we continue to work, our two U.S. senators and anyone in our congressional delegation, but Del Bene specifically, because she's one of the conferees, to help us do everything we can to try to get Congress to act. And who knows what will happen there, but David's been part of those discussions with us, and it's going quite well. We'll continue to do that. I know we've reached out, as you know, our state elected officials, Governor Inslee, our AG, our treasurer, and Lieutenant Governor have forwarded letters of how important it is for the Congress to act on this. So, David, I don't know if you want to share anything more that I obviously probably missed, but I just wanted to share with you, we continue to press upon the need for the Safe Banking Act, which would really begin to deal with the issue that we have of cash in our stores.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good roundup. I would just, my personal thought is it's going to be an uphill battle. You know, the House has passed that bill 5 times, and the Senate under Republican control didn't. Now under Democratic control, it seems leadership is opposed to it. Not to the thing, but they want to wait till they can pass a much larger cannabis bill that would legalize or decriminalize and create a more socially equitable system for the market. But I don't know, you may be more optimistic than I am, but everybody we talk to, it seems like it's going to be a heavy lift to try to get this through the Senate.
Yeah, I think you're right, David. Everything's a lift with Congress these days. Even something as simple and seems like should be understood and how anyone could disagree with it. But you're right, David. I think there's a number of issues with it. And the one that you just spoke of that we talked about yesterday was Schumer, Wyden, Booker have what's called the MORE Act that they've introduced to legalize federally. And one of the problems that we're having is they're not interested necessarily in moving forward any other proposal unless that proposal also moves forward. And that's the leadership of the Senate right there. So with Schumer, so I think to David's point, it's not just Republicans that are problematic here. It's the leadership in the Senate, which has been where it's stalled. I think it's actually been approved 6 times, including, Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck, who is one of the co-sponsors and sponsors over the years of this proposal. So makes perfect sense to do it. And again, I think you're right, David. It's going to be difficult, but I think we're doing everything we can to help. Yeah,
the only thing is that we're always very strong in our support for the goals that Senator Schumer and Senator Booker in particular talk about. We're working on the same issues here. I understand the concern that if you do, their view is that if you do anything to basically expand cannabis businesses today, it gets harder for new people to enter that market. And we understand that, and we face that. But I think that this is a urgent situation that requires some common sense public safety move here. And then without it, I don't think we're doing anybody any favors, existing licensees or future licensees, to allow the crime around these retail outlets and others to continue like this.
Yeah, and I just don't want to forget to mention, thanks to the staff, and appreciate the staff work on whether it's the training, whether it's the contract we're doing with the assessments, the work that Chandra and Jim and finance and Brian, communications, the whole team has been really doing everything possible to do everything we can to try to do something to help with these armed robberies, and I kind of knock on wood saying there appears to be quite, we're seeing fewer than we saw when this first started. So, that's a blessing in itself, but just want to recognize the staff that's been working hard to do everything they can. And there's even, so meetings continuing with DOR, Department of Revenue, and the governor's office to look at potential legislation to possibly use some of the revenue that's created from cannabis to assist these businesses with the investments that they may have to make in order to make their locations safer. And so those discussions are continuing to happen. David's been part of that, and so we continue to try to do everything we can to assist. So I'll stop there and take any questions you may have.
Any questions for Rick?
I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment, and I just want to thank you, Rick, for the opportunity to sit down with you and staff to talk about the agency request legislation. I think that'll be extremely helpful and valuable to all of our time, and look forward to those conversations. So thank you.
Jim.
Thanks for your update.
Great. Thanks, Rick. The only thing I'd add on the safe banking thing is our CFO, Jim Morgan, let us know that last week was the due date for the monthly tax payments. And for the first time since we legalized cannabis, his office, his team received no cash tax payments. So there've been some months where there's just one, but we finally got to the point where there was none. And he believes that's not just the first time for us in Washington State, but maybe the first time anybody in the country collected a month's worth of cannabis taxes with no cash. And what that tells us is there are some options for banking for those businesses, which is super important. There's not enough. And of course, it doesn't do anything for the credit card services piece that the Safe Banking Act really would help. But anyhow, I saw it as progress for the industry, progress for us too, just and appreciate the financial institutions in our state that are treating these businesses like they are. They're legitimate businesses that the voters have legalized. And so, a little bit of progress. It was good to see. All right.
Yeah,
Thanks.
that just takes us back to the work that at the time Congressman Denny Heck and Department of Financial Institutions and the governor's office did in helping us get, I think at this point, what I saw yesterday because of questions that came from Congressman Del Bene's staff about how many state banks, how many state credit unions are providing banking services. I think we're up to 5 state banks, 4 credit unions that are providing banking, which is why we've gotten to the point, as Jim shared, that we have everyone paying their taxes electronically, which is by far better, as David said, than most states who struggle. They didn't have, there's a whole reason for this, and it's how we license and how we enforce the cannabis industry that led to many of our state credit unions and state banks saying we're going to allow banking because they get some of the information that we provide on a monthly or quarterly basis of what are the transactions that are occurring in the traceability system, so they can make sure that the accounts that they have with these licensees fits with what they're telling us with respect to their sales. So I can, for you, Jim, who's new to this, I can share more information, but that strict licensing process that we created is the basis by which we've allowed banking. It's really kind of interesting, and most of the states don't have that. That's why they're struggling to get people to pay their taxes electronically. So I'll stop there and appreciate the time with you.
Great. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
that takes us to the end of most of the agenda. I just a couple of comments. One, I was gone last week, and I was in DC. Coincidentally, it was Law Enforcement Appreciation Week in DC, which was evident from the time we got on our flight with members of the Seattle Police Department Drum and Fife Corps. On the way back, I ran into State Patrol Chief John Batiste, who somebody I've always respected and seen, and I know Director Brady was there, and she's shared some thoughts with her team about how meaningful that trip was for her and her son, and it's an opportunity to just shine a light on our law enforcement team. It is a law enforcement agency within our agency, and one of the things I learned from reading Director Brady's notes, even beforehand when she left, she mentioned this, and it's a dangerous law enforcement job, and our agency did have back in the Liquor Control Board days when we had agents, one who died in the line of duty and is remembered on the police memorials. Agent Melvin Journey is back in '77. He was ambushed in the driveway of his house. He was the target of a mob hit. He was shot 5 times, and he survived that. But it turned out that his emergency blood transfusions were tainted with hepatitis C, and later in life he died from that hepatitis C, and so he is remembered as dying in the line of duty. And it's just, I mean, 77 seems like a long time ago in some ways, but you think about, and he was, looking into issues around some organized crime around alcohol and strip clubs and others, and it's just not that long ago. And sometimes we all don't think about our folks as law enforcement in that same way, because they don't wear uniforms now. But one of the things I found when I was reading about law enforcement officers lost in the line of duty was comments from former President Obama during one of the law enforcement appreciation weeks while he was in office. And he sort of, I think, was trying to make the point of who all law enforcement is. He goes, whether deputies or detectives, tribal police or Forest Service officers, beat cops or federal agents, we hold up all those who wear the badge as heroes. Though they too often spend their days witnessing America at its worst, in their extraordinary examples, we see America at its best. Now, he didn't specifically mention liquor or cannabis officers in that line, but I think it is really important for all of us to just look at law enforcement in that big frame. And I will just say in closing, and I've said this before, but in my interactions with our enforcement team, I see that professionalism, the integrity, and at the same time, an acknowledgement about how the newest industry we regulate is growing and changing, and they maintain an open mind about how to evolve along with that industry and the state's growing acceptance to the market. That's not easy in any line of work, I don't think, and I appreciate the work they've put into evolving and coming to the place they are today. So I guess take this as a belated acknowledgement of Law Enforcement Week, and we do appreciate our team a lot and support them in all they do. So that's all I had. Any other comments from board members or anything? Dustin, Jim, sorry, are you on there? Yes.
No, I was just going to echo your appreciation to our enforcement team.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, and I think when you get a chance to do some ride-alongs, you'll get to see that in a different light too. It's a lot of fun. I found those.
Definitely looking forward to that.
To be really helpful. So, Dustin, any executive assistant report today?
Going to spend another session this afternoon with IT and communications in the boardroom as we're gearing up for the opportunity to at least somewhat return to in-person meetings in the middle of June. We're not quite there yet. We're not quite ready. Still got some things to iron out, but made a lot of progress last week and hope to get that buttoned up this afternoon.
That's great. And one thing I'd say is just, clear from what they're doing is working on the IT. When we talk about return, we will not be doing away with the online presence. This is going to be a permanent function of the LCB for people to be able to attend and participate in our meetings from anywhere. And we are looking at what we would do then also as an in-person, and that is still, in the works to figure out exactly what that is. But we think that the online meetings have been a great success. We see people from all around the state who are able to join us for not just public hearings, but public comment periods as well. So that'll still be a part of it, and we'll make sure everybody knows however this is going to change or broaden to have any in-person piece of it as well. All right. Thank you, Dustin. And that is the end of our agenda. We will adjourn. We do not have a board meeting tomorrow, but we will be back next week with a full agenda at caucus and others. So thank you for joining us, and we will adjourn the board caucus meeting for Tuesday, May 24th, 2022. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, David.